Ah. Hello, exciting.
Hi, welcome back to Unique Minds of the Okanagan. I'm Robb, and we are on location in Penticton with Harley Pyrozyk. Harley is one of the long-time running musicians of the Okanagan music scene, and I'm really excited to sit down with him. How you doing?
Doing good. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for being here and doing this and being a part of this. This is awesome.
I'm really excited. So why don't you start off by telling basically who you are and how you got into music.
My name is Harley, or go by Carl's on the drums is kind of the stage name as it's kind of been over time now, and started music when I was about 13 or so, a teenager age, and it was just a drive to get into music. There wasn't a particular calling, but the music was definitely the drums that called to me. So I was just, wanted to explore that option, and thankfully I had parents that would, happy to have a drum kit as for a 13-year-old to bang on and be probably pretty obnoxious in those early days. But so started with that. I was fortunate to be part of essentially like a lesson group with a very infamous drummer, Steve McVie. And he, essentially kind of like took a good bunch of drummers, I would say like a good handful of about a dozen or so that he kind of gave lessons to and kind of gave and taught his knowledge as he was, he didn't actually perform in any particular band. He was just really known for his pipe band but just the ability just to play any music. And so got lessons from him for a good 5 or so years as growing up, through 13 or 4 or 5 years into that high school age. So, just kind of got the basics of the drums at that point. But, there's basics of drums, and then there's making music with like-minded people. So first kind of experience was actually my friend right here that's interviewing me with Robb. We a lot of my roots here was founded here with you yourself. So started kind of messing around in my basement actually, and remember a few original songs that we made, and if I can remember some of those titles of like Up There and Showdown and some of these other songs that I would love to be able to hear now, because unfortunately there's no recordings in 2003. It's kind of hard to record any of that, but so that was just kind of messing around, not really even had a band name. I don't know, we were just waffling on so many ideas, but it was never, I think we did one show at Voodoo's, which Voodoo's was an integral part of the Penticton music scene.
Yeah.
Which we can kind of get into more of that, but so started with that, but that led into the Pasties, and that was kind of the first actual band, and it was starts me, you, JP Babbage, and then we had the Fred Smith and Ewan Calvert as well. So it was a 5-piece to start with, and did quite a few shows around the Okanagan, again in the small scene, nothing too many venues, just like Voodoo's and maybe Fibonacci's, can't even remember that at that point. But
Grateful Fed,
as the 5-piece.
The Kelowna Club, we did a show.
We definitely became solid when we became a 3-piece, and there wasn't much after. We were a 5-piece for a very short amount of time, and then we became me, you, and JP Babbage, which was then like really for a good amount of years, 4 or 5 years. So I think leading up to about 2010-ish, so I would say about 2006 to 2010 was probably our kind of time where we were doing music, like I said, like in Kelowna, the Grateful Fed, and multiple venues in Penticton with Voodoo's. We did like a little festival, Gyro Park, if I remember. It was really fun. It was definitely the moments that kind of like formed my musician, like all those influences coming in and just starting to shape into a sound that we could kind of call our own and something unique. So that was my essentials of music at that point. And that was kind of the first foundation of music, and then it kind of unfortunately had a big lull for many point in my 20s of not having music in my life until it kind of came back to me in about 2019.
With the Flannel Contract, I believe.
Yeah, so it really started with the cover band, actually, the ADDs. So good.
Okay.
Yeah, so some friends of ours. This would be Brody, and then also Cam, some good friends, just buddies of ours, and we've always said, oh, we should jam, we should make music. A lot of it is just talk, but it was New Year's Eve of going into 2020 before everything hit the fan. It was like 2019, golden time, right? And remember us, it was, we actually had my djembe, my good old hand drum that has been around forever. And we actually just kind of did a good 3-piece jam with just the 3 of us. And we're like, all right, we can do this, we can make this happen. So it was kind of from that point, we actually I brought my old blew the dust off the drums from from that time. Because now we're going like, this is 2019. I hadn't played music since, like 2010, 2011. Few kind of musings of music here and there, but it was very loose. So it was getting back into the music. That was like, it was a huge calling to get back in. There was a void for sure that I felt. So even if it was just kind of a very laissez-faire kind of jam, we weren't making originals with the ADDs, but there was a huge calling to get back, and I'm very, very happy I did. And still to this day, we still do with the ADDs. It's not my main project, for sure, as you've just kind of mentioned. My main project is the Flannel Contract. So the Flannel Contract, as I still do the ADDs, and we're essentially a cover band, and a couple originals, but we actually haven't performed those in years. We just do covers, which I can kind of, shelf and kind of get back to those covers. But just going back to the Flannel Contract, it's that started for me in 2021. So pandemic had kind of happened already for a good, already a few months of that in a year. Not even a year, I guess, at this point. But the main reason how I got into that band was that my partner, Kat, she worked with Kynan at the Bench Market. She's a barista, and he was working in the kitchen there. And their drummer at the time, he had gone to Vancouver to do some schooling there, and they were kind of left without a drummer. And there was always kind of this idea that he was going to return into the band and do that. So there was just kind of this like temporary thing. I was like, Kat's like, these guys great. Like, I'm sure you'd get along. I was like, yeah, why not? So I just went to this jam phase. Hadn't even really known these guys yet, but it instantly clicked that I'm like, oh yeah, I know these guys. Like, we're like-minded. They're. So started practicing with them in that, like 2021, and then like kind of learned their songs. At this point, they had about 8 original songs or so, less than a dozen for sure. And yeah, learned those songs, and then we performed a couple shows. So we did one at Slackwater Brewing. And so this was kind of when everything opened back up again. There was that little window of that time before everything closed again. So in that little window, we did a couple shows. I think it was one at Slackwater, and one maybe it was Clancy's at the time. I have to kind of remember that, it's going back some years. But we did a couple shows, and yeah, I just knew that this was like for sure my main cause. As much as I love the ADDs, like this, there's something more special when you're performing original music and you're just kind of putting your heart and soul a little bit more into it when it is your own, and it's your own little baby essentially. Even though it was kind of, I wasn't there to create those songs with them, I could add my own influence to this, because the drummer at the time, his abilities, I think, were he was more of a novice drummer, and the recordings that they did have, I could see that there could have been a different direction of where the sound was going. And so I could be like, well, I could see the bass is kind of does this dip here, and I think that would really fit with like some sort of like down roll and that. So I kind of put my own flavor onto that, and and I hate to say that I kind of pushed the other guy out, but it's a little bit of kind of the reality of it. But the problem is that he was in school, and it's tough when he wasn't in Penticton and he was gonna like commute back, but school's finished, and we definitely offered him an opportunity to come back in, and I just don't know if his heart was in it anymore, and that, so it was a little bit of mutualness, but I hope it's not like a bitter feeling at the end, but it's for the best, for where the Flannel Contract has gone since I've joined in 21 is massive, and I couldn't see it any other way now at this point. It just seems like, So yeah, that's kind of the nutshell of the music of kind of where I am today.
Yeah.
And yeah, like having both bands, sometimes even a third band, depending. But with both bands, it is a lot between, you know, trying to fit in the practices, trying to do shows, and that. The third band that I've kind of done as well is with my brother-in-law, Will Schlackel, who is a very infamous musician in Penticton. He's been around for, at least, you know, in the music scene in Penticton for well over 20 years or so. But, you know, his whole life he's been a musician and very respected. Few bands. So yeah, being a brother-in-law musician, we've done a few shows. We performed under the band Bad Apple.
I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it was fun. So we were mainly, it was a cover band, and we were just, you know, doing song for, you know, note for note covers. One of the members of that band, like the lead singer, he was one of the most amazing musicians I've actually ever played with. Singer, but also like multi-talented, piano, guitar, like everything. He does have a lot of demons that he working with, you know, drugs and alcohol is present, and it's tough. And so right now we're just kind of, you know, letting him kind of figure that out. And yeah, so I'm sure we'll get back doing that again too. But when you add in the third to the you gotta, it's a lot of music in the life at that point. But that's okay, I love it. So
Yeah, it's definitely hard to juggle it all with even one band, but to have multiple bands, it's not easy.
It's not easy, yeah, but it is worth it. The nice thing of those other two bands, like the cover bands, they are so back burner too for the main part, because those members all have kids now. You know, we're at the point of our lives where that's a huge part, and which is awesome. It's great, but it does make it harder time for music, and family always does come first. So for that band, we did a show just a couple weeks ago at the Gun Barrel up at Apex, which is a very great venue up there, which is fun. But we don't have anything booked, I think, until the summer again, which is nice. So we don't only do about like 3 or 4 shows a year, and a lot of them are like weddings and those kind of shows too. So it's nice to balance it when it is such a, you know, if I was as active as I am with the Flannel Contract, where we're practicing every week, we're doing a show once or twice a month. If I had that same amount of level, then you're definitely hard to balance. But I can make it work with that and still have a day job and still have a life and still do everything else. So
what's the difference between do you find there's a big difference between doing weddings versus doing rock shows, underground rock shows?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, it's definitely a different vibe. The fun thing of a wedding is that there's definitely like, it's hard to make people mad. You know, essentially everyone's there for a good time. There's like a lot of love in the air. You know, so, and a lot of alcohol flowing generally too. So, you know, sometimes people's expectations too are like, you know, a little less in a band, like as long as they're having a good time and a fun time. So that's kind of a little less pressure sometimes. Maybe you don't have to hit the song exactly note for note, when I feel like sometimes we're playing in a bar where, you know, you got the musicians more looking at you, a little more of that pressure a little bit. But fun thing though at a wedding is that you can just play like any song too, and it's really funny of like kind of what is more receptive and what's not. Like we've ended up covering like Taylor Swift and other ridiculous songs that I wouldn't ever thought that I'd cover, but it's hilarious to see that like the engagement, how much people like get involved with the song that I don't experience much at a bar. It can happen. Like I said, bars, like alcohol can be flowing. It can be a similar situation. But a wedding are interesting. The nice thing also of a wedding too is that artists, as we know, are so underpaid in this world. And in a wedding, you can kind of justify your worth a little bit more. People are willing to pay what you are willing, and typically that is no less than I feel like than $1,000, because like that's kind of what you're doing, bringing a lot of bringing gear, doing all that, and to try to get $1,000 sometimes guaranteed from a bar would be like prying teeth sometimes. Like that's like impossible. Exactly. So that you can kind of put that price on the music of what it truly is worth and get paid for it is a good feeling. You know, it is nice to be like, yeah, I'm, you know,
making
money at this. Feels like an actual like, you know, job, which you know, I love the music and you love to do it for the passion, but if you can make some financial benefit of it too, then that's, you know, even better too. So the weddings can kind of essentially help fund the other band. That's exactly what I do. Any money that I make from that band, which is essentially the ADDs, I go and put that into, going into merch or going into recordings, back into the fund to kind of bring money out. So it's my capital essentially, that I don't have to use my day job money to fund my other projects. So that is an awesome thing with the weddings.
That's funny.
Right.
With the education that you have, because you went to school for, we were speaking of with Kynan and Chris about it, your arts and entertainment management.
Correct.
Have you even seen a difference from what you've been taught into what the industry is now? Because you were taught from the industry standard that was what everybody was used to.
So it was a degree at Capilano University for Arts and Entertainment Management that I got back in 2011, I believe. I graduated with that. And it was very useful to know how the industry, a lot of the ins and outs, especially about SOCAN rights and a lot of things that still haven't changed to this day, a lot of the background legalese of music and how a lot of those rights work and stuff. It can be confusing. That's still kind of set today, even in a digital world. But there's so much that is completely irrelevant. And they even kind of knew that. At least there were some teachers that kind of had a little bit knowing at 2010 and 11 that there was kind of a change on the horizon with the rise of the internet. But it's some of the information in terms of how to book shows, how to get a record deal and all those kind of things is definitely not in the ways where it's totally a social media platform in today. It's interesting to see what the course would be now and seeing how they've adapted it, because I would assume they would have to in today's world. So I do think it was useful at the time and still using a lot of management practices. But exactly in hindsight, could all this stuff be learned without having a degree? Probably, right? So
fair.
I don't know if it really truly was worth it. But it's definitely not a regret, and it's great to still experience and go through that process of school and all that as well too. But it's definitely changed from what I learned of that, and some of it's I completely forgot because it just wasn't really applied, right? You learned it, and then we were on this change into this world, so be oh great, I have this information, and then I never even got to apply it because by 2012, 2013 we already saw such a change that now if I try to even think back on some of the information I graduated more than 15 years ago, it's what did I even learn again too? How did I apply that? It's changed so much on such a framework from what it is now, right? So
it's funny because that led to you managing around 9 artists and booking shows and being the graphic designer for the record label that we worked on together.
Correct. Yes. Though that was a huge part of the music too. As much as I wasn't performing and as a musician at that point, and let's say we did that for as Mad Melody from 2012 to about 2014ish, something around there. And I'd use that management to kind of create which we called a record label, which was almost more of a
family.
A family, but more of a promotion company, more is kind of what it was, promotion, production company. We tried to encompass it all, which was really cool. I think we did take a great undertaking. I think the greatest achievement that we did was in the hip-hop scene, because we worked, you mentioned, a family of eight or 9 different artists, which were mainly hip-hop artists. We did have a couple bands that we worked with, but really showcasing the hip-hop music scene, which I really learned a lot from. That wasn't my first calling. Of course, in the early 2000s, there was such a influence of hip hop and music, but it wasn't my main kind of driver of music too. But once I got into that in 2012, because you were so involved with it, I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. This is a whole artist avenue that I just didn't really recognize and fully really kind of give credit at the time until that moment, until 2012, and I was like, oh man, this is amazing. The story that you'd be able to tell and behind these really awesome beats, and I thought it was a really cool and really opened up my eyes. So I was so stoked to promote you guys and really try to book shows. You said graphic design, so I was really using poster design, and we were you were definitely the backbone of the production, but that definitely came with like a whole art and the whole branding that we were definitely creating. It was really cool. I was really proud of what we did. But the hip hop rap battles was probably definitely we were the starting of that though. Like I know that there's big valley battles here in Kelowna, but it's
Which is actually one of our former business partners.
exactly
It stemmed off
right.
from
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
funny.
Like it's not to say that we helped like create that in any means. Like that was totally theirs, but like to start that scene into that, yeah, I think we definitely were helped play.
The topic battles were
Yeah.
definitely entertaining
The
to
topic
see.
rap battles, those were very cool. So yeah, like a whole event where instead of a typical rap battle where you're going like one off, one back to very insult driven, we were like, well, let's bring positive, let's bring love into this situation because that was a huge kind of inspiration. So by using peace and love, but by still wanting to have a competition, it became a topic battle, as you just mentioned. So the topics were just kind of thrown out. Could have been a topic like, pineapples, and then you gotta use pineapples, and then use that as your talking point and build off of that. And it was a really cool way to kind of create a judging system where you're still refined into a box, and but you got to think on the fly at the same time. You can't necessarily pre-prepare too much, as most kind of true rap battles were kind of going like that as well too, right? So.
Yeah, and you were mentioning the flyers. I still think to this day those are some of my favorite flyers from the Okanagan scene. Like which one is it? The Dragon Ball Z one.
Oh yes.
Is still in a frame in my office, and
epic.
I love that one.
yeah, it was fun. It was taking a lot of inspiration. I was using just Photoshop at that point. I had never actually got formally trained in graphic design. All through high school, though, I did take, there was, Photoshop classes in our high school, which was actually really cool that they offered that. I wonder if that's still a thing in today's high schools. But to learn the basics of Photoshops in a digital media class through an elective in high school was actually incredibly beneficial. So by learning the bones of Photoshop and then kind of going from there and self-learning, I could end up using some pretty all right graphics by not just using a good old MS Paint or something like that was available at the time, because you didn't really have much graphic design. So to have the ability to use Photoshop and have access to it, which I don't think I paid for the program, but it was good to explore that program and really use the branding, and because it's an amazing program. So,
what up to this day has been your biggest challenge musically?
Biggest challenge musically, like I guess for just getting the inspiration to get back into it too, what was a lot, like I felt like I was making excuses for a long time, talking about, oh, I can't find a place to jam, or oh, I don't have the time, or to that. So to really commit and to finally get back in from that void from like 2012 to 2019, a good 5-6 years where there was no me not even doing any production of music or any of the promotion side or any performing. So it kind of felt like a challenge to finally like pull the trigger to like get back into it, to like, let's form a band with these ADD guys and like let's just get the ball going, and like, so, and I'm so happy I did, because it's been, you don't realize how much of a hole it is until it's gone. So that's definitely a challenge in terms of like, getting it to where I am now. But now that's not necessarily a challenge for me today. Like in terms of actual like me sitting on the drums and the challenges that present to me on that side, like as a drummer, we're always meant to keep the time and keep the beat, always that. So there is a part of me that wants to sometimes change my tempo, change my speed. So that's always a challenge for me to work on in self, of like making sure that I'm keeping that tempo, keeping that metronome, keeping that, because, that is such a critical part. And I know that I can tend to maybe a little speed up at times and slow down. So just as an ongoing, just, making sure that I can be the best drummer that I can be is being aware of that. And sometimes maybe it's maybe more of an obstacle than a challenge, but I feel like I can conquer that. So yeah, other challenges, I guess, just present themselves into just social media, of just trying to be better at that in terms of the band, trying to like be the business side of the band, can just be the challenges there, which admittedly I feel like I can always do better on in terms of that, especially the social media. When that one's tough for me to really like, create the content, and I know that's where it has to be, as we just kind of touched on that earlier. But I don't know, to have the witty content, it doesn't have to be witty, but just original, something that people want to watch, something that feels engaging enough. That's a challenge, and that is a challenge. And I know that is something that's really important, though, to do. And so it's wrestling with that and be like, I gotta make sure I'm better at this, but at the same time, how do I be better at this? What I mean? So so the promoting, the self-promotion of yourself, but also your music, and that is definitely a challenge that I think I could do better at.
I think every band challenge is social media, honestly, because we've touched on it before, but like, we're not made to make content. We're made to make music.
No.
So like, you already put so much energy into making the music and getting it recorded and ready to be presented, and then you have to think of, okay, well, I've also got to be creating content that's viral enough. You know what I mean? And most of the time it's really cheesy. I see a lot of bands online that have like really cheesy videos, reels trying to promote their music, and it's
not authentic.
No, it's cringy. It's very cringy because they're just doing it because they need to. And to create something that's genuine is very difficult, especially when it's not everything's set up, your camera's set up, your lighting's set up. It's not in the moment. And that's where I feel like bands having somebody with a camera at all times is what they need. Because realistically, those are where you get those magic moments. And like, you can take those clips and then put your song behind it. And that's way more valuable and enjoyable to watch than... I don't know.
So it's like manufactured, right?
Like reels that are just, I don't know. It's a really hard challenge because
it is.
You already have the marketing, the writing, then you've got to do the PR work, which is not easy at all. Trying to get proper PR where your music is actually getting pushed to the right places where it's going to get heard, and then promote it even more is really difficult, I find, which is probably something that you were taught that still transcends today, is like the management, the PR, the actual like pressing of records as well, like getting those contacts and understanding how that goes. Prices change and stuff like that, but realistically, like, that's harnessing that information in today's market and time, I feel, is where like the great content is. So like, because you have, all three of you have such great value in your brains, utilizing content that's based on what you can teach versus what you have to show might be like a really good thing to do, in the sense of like drum playthroughs and guitar playthroughs and stuff like that, or even like topics, just like simple topics that relates to the band. Because like, I struggle too with social media. Like, I hate being on camera when I don't want to be. Right? Like, if I'm filming myself, I feel really awkward, and it feels weird. It feels icky.
Exactly, I know. And I don't know if that's just because of like our age or generation. Like, maybe we're just that little bit too old to really like embrace it. Like, maybe it is just that little bit of that younger generation to feel like more comfortable, like, because we just kind of came into the phones around like when we were already in our 20s, and maybe we're just taught to be like, I don't know, like, it just feels weird. But like, versus if you were like had it when you were like 16, 17, which we didn't have, you'd just be like, yeah, whatever, like, I'll just post on my phone like that. So maybe there's just that weird like cuspy age gap that we have, where it does just feel a little bit harder for us than versus a younger now, which is like where all the content is generally. So I think that has something maybe to do with it.
I personally just feel like it's very almost narcissistic to constantly be like, look at me. I can't do it. It's weird. It feels weird. That's all, right? Like, even when I look back at it, versus like filming shows or filming music videos where I know I have a point, I have an objective.
Totally. Yeah. Like, yeah, exactly. Getting filmed at a show is like, whatever. It's not like I'm afraid to be on the camera as we're now.
Or
but
talking, right?
it's that acting promotion, I guess. And it doesn't have to be acting. I guess that's what I have to keep telling myself. It's like it can be authentic. It can be real. Like I have TikTok myself, and how much of it's just like real talk and that I can just relate to. It doesn't have to be special, but does that engage people though? Is it worth doing that at the end? Like I don't know. These are the questions, right? That's yeah. It's a funny one.
It is, and I think that's kind of the biggest challenge for any artist nowadays is what really matters to you. Is it your art or is it getting seen? And that's where I find a lot of people have a difficult to get that gap, that bridge, right?
Yeah. Well, it's hard because we live in this influencer world now, and that's who decides. And influencers don't necessarily have necessarily much skills except for just their influence, right? So if they're blending the influencer and then the musician into like this one entity, that just it's hard. Now you got to be like two in one, because if you're just a musician showing reels of you just playing, like that's right. You have to be the influencer, unfortunately, to get the views. But then you're an influencer, and then you're like, well, that's not music. It's not great. It's like this whole it's like it doesn't. It's like two magnets trying to like push them together.
Yeah.
Like they are negative, and you're like it's just it doesn't quite work. Like it's funny because it just but some guys can fit it. They can be authentic, and they're just like just with their phone and that. But I don't know. It's like to get to that point, like, you know what I mean? Like once you have enough followers on that, you can just create reels that are just you, and you just got a phone and that, and your fans will love it and you'll engage with that. But like, if you don't really have many followers, like if you're doing that format of just being like, hey guys, like how's it going? Like really, I'm just talking to you directly, but I'm talking to like, 100 people or so. I'm not saying like 100, but like a small amount of followers, that it's hard to push that to 10,000 followers, to push that to amount of people that can like engage with you, to feel authentic, because you feel like you gotta like, you're up against the road a bit to being like, I gotta create content that just goes viral, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's tough.
Virality is a weird thing. It's an enigma to me. It comes in the most random times. I've had 3 things that blew up in my time. One was 500,000 views on the stupidest reel I've ever made about the band, and it was literally just cropping Happy Gilmore scene when the grandma says, "My hands are tired."
Right.
500,000 views in like a week. It was just like boom. And then 2 songs online of hip hop that are 11 years old out of nowhere. Just so like you don't expect it, and you don't.
And I guess that's
it,
you
right?
just got to
It's
throw
weird.
the content out there and see what sticks, I guess. And just that's the only way to do it, is just having a bunch out there and seeing like, oh, this random video took off, and I didn't really think much of it, but it does. Like, I guess that's the challenge. You just got to put it out there.
I think that's what the younger generation has over us, is we have this weird mentality that music has to be perfected before it's heard. Where we're always trying to get it to the perfect sound before it's released, because that's how our greats, people we thought were great, made it. They made beautiful music, and it was released. It's now quality over, or it's now quantity over quality. And if you can put out 70 songs and 20 of them are good, that is more beneficial nowadays almost. But and that's why the younger generation, I feel, is like so much easier at getting stuff out, is because they're not worried about the production value.
No,
And just putting it out, and that's the hardest thing for me.
That's true. And then again, it's like kind of gaining the system, because if you have a bunch of songs, 70 songs at like, 100,000 views, even at like our status, that's still better than trying to achieve one song at a million views, right? Like you can get the same amount of numbers on your Spotify records, right, by doing that, by not having a banger song and just having, a bunch of that. So I don't know if it's intentional or not, but that just kind of seems how the system kind of goes that way. And then you're kind of got more views, you got more content, you got more followers, right? I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I struggle with that concept daily. Even right now, I have music I want to release, and I'm just like, I gotta upload it, and I'm like, I gotta do this before I do that. This got to be fixed. I gotta fix that.
Yeah.
With the Flannel Contract, you guys have done a lot for the community in Penticton. You guys not only host a lot of the shows with Chris, and with other groups and stuff, but how have you seen the Penticton scene change from when we were playing with the Pasties to now you playing with the Flannel?
Right. Yeah. Like, so you mentioned like our work there. Yeah, we do lots of fundraiser work, and we'll pretty much do any fundraiser for, as long as it's a good cause, for Penticton, just because we think that's such an important thing to do for the community is to spread what you can give, and we can give music. So we're always happy to do that. But you said that the change, like, yeah, it's totally this ebb and flow of where the music scene has gone. So we were performing as the Pasties in 2007, 8, kind of in the peak of it. There was a lot of bands that were in the scene. Like, we were played with DFY and Hardball and Times of Madness and Hanio and oh man, there was so many bands that still exist in some form with those musicians, but there was a big collective of musicians at the time, all really, I feel like, supporting one another, helping to do shows. There was definitely a very, not a lot of ego in the scene at that time. I felt like we were all just trying to better ourselves, or all trying to better the scene by bettering every band, which was awesome. Like, right, we'd drop on the show, do this, jamming together, collective, jams, like on stage, even performing live. So there was this huge community vibes that existed in that time. And then it definitely was this tapering off, and I think it was a lot of the music scene of the musicians that were around at that time moving off, going to other places. In your young 20s, you're kind of really exploring yourself. You kind of move away. So I don't know if that was kind of a lot of us leaders of the music scene kind of just fell away. We weren't really as grouped together as much anymore, and that might have kind of contributed to the little bit of the downfall of the scene. But I think at the time, it was the rise of electronic music. As we were kind of touched, we were doing the hip-hop scene in about 2012. It kind of transitioned to a very, like, produced electronic kind of music, the scene. Dubstep was just coming out. It was this huge, like, massive kind of new music. And that, it's like, if you were to define that generation, I'd say from 2010 to 2020, that decade of music, because we like to break them into decades, that decade was just electronic hip-hop decade. Like, that was the time. So I think we had this whole just cultural downfall of being like, I'm not really into people with a guitar and drums and singing as much. Like, I want to see someone with a DJ. I want to see someone with, like, a hip-hop night, right? So I think there was that scene. I think our leaders kind of weren't necessarily there. So it was like it was not necessarily a vibrant music scene for a lot of that, mid 2000, like 2012 to 15, 16. It was a pretty lull of a music scene. Not to say that it wasn't, but it was tough for a lot of musicians. And then it was like, I wasn't performing music, and there was this void in my life. So I think I called to a lot of people. I don't think I was the only one. So that's when we saw musicians starting to come back together again, like these old bands like Hardball and, these musicians that were, iconic, Robb, all these guys, like, all really starting to get really back into the scene. I think maybe that was something possibly just playing armchair psychology, but is that we all kind of had a calling for it, all in a similar kind of time. So we all just kind of got back into the music, and the music scene was changing again. Like, we were going into more of a strip back, more of this folk kind of pop music was kind of taking a little bit more of a, that electronic was taking a bit of back step in that time. And then I think, so the music was coming up. It was coming up again. And then COVID, and then that's like kind of 2019, 2020, a very big marker in time. Mm-hmm. As it was kind of people getting more interested in back again, it cut off suddenly, and then it was taken from everybody. And that was, obviously it's a huge moment for all musicians. We can all look back at that and being like, what the heck was going on, right? Like, none of us could perform, none of us could play. So then a little bit of a blessing, I think, because once we could come back, people realized, being like, oh my God, I need music, whether I need to go see it and perform it, or I need music, I need to play it, I need to be a part of it. So it was a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of us, of just like, we can't let music die. So to see where the music scene is now, since from 2022 and onwards and stuff, as we're in 25 now, it's some of the most vibrant I've seen it ever right now. Like, there's so many bands coming onto the scene, all different genres, We got rock bands, we got like bluegrass bands, we got metal bands, we got like such a vibrant scene. And again, I'd like to think, but I don't feel like there's a lot of ego also in our music scene. I think we're very supportive. I think all of us, whether you are in the metal band or the metal scene or just a singer-songwriter with acoustic guitar, there's a lot of unity right now, and being like, yeah, you're doing music, you're building the scene up. So I feel like we are on definitely this upward again, even more of an upward from when I first started. So I think, and I love to see that. It's amazing. So I think we're on a more of a high in music right now, and I think it took a crazy global pandemic to realize that we need music in our lives, and I hope it's here to stay for this next while. But it is one of these things. The music scene is kind of always built into these chunks, and it's so hard to predict what will happen by 2030, and like what will the music scene be in the next when we're into a new kind of chunk time of time, and hopefully it'll be as vibrant, and but time will tell.
It's a really weird time right now because At Times of Madness just started back
Right.
up, and Kevin Moore from back in the day, he was the Bleeding Alarms guitar player.
Yeah.
Is in Tidebringer, and they're just
so
going on
cool.
a Japanese tour now.
All right, so cool.
It's kind of cool to see, and then Jordan from Stutterfly is like one of the biggest producers in Kelowna.
That's so cool.
The people that like we looked up to were the ones that like we went to their shows as young kids because we were fans. They're now, after their giant hiatus, picking it back up with new projects and experience. And I think that's the one thing too, is you can only write and talk about things for so long, like as a musician, without having to have a break to experience life so that you could talk again. Because if you've talked about all the problems in your life and you're playing all those problems out through your music, and you finally hit a point where it's like, hey, I've got no more problems, and I've wrote my entire life has been written based on problems. Right. What do I do now? So you kind of got to live, and I think that also helps is growing as a musician. Like you were saying, a lot of the musicians tend to leave. Yeah. Like Riley went to England, and he's still there.
Killing it,
right?
Like huge.
Pardon me.
Last time I talked to him, he had a story working with Radiohead's. Okay, not Tom York, not the other guitar.
Ed.
The guy that nobody knows the name, right? Yeah. Working with Ed, and he was telling, he was doing a solo project, doing that, and so he was totally working exactly with him doing his album, and it was just interesting, like Riley telling me about Ed and being like how he's always felt like he's in the shadow of Tom and Johnny, and so it's like he is, unfortunately, but it's like God trying to make a music that's his own and trying to like not just be the other guy and stuff. So it was just like very interesting internal conflict that he's having, and meanwhile like Riley says like, oh my God, this is like Radiohead, like I can't like I'm trying not to fanboy and trying to be like, this is a real guy's problem, like I gotta be a human and deal with this, but at the same time it's Radiohead, like oh my God. But yeah, so no, it's amazing to see what he's doing.
It's really cool to see because you went to Australia for, we were talking before, 18 months.
Yeah.
And you were planning on 2 years. How did the Australian culture affect your drumming? Because I know with seeing Aboriginals out there, that probably would have been awe-inspiring.
Definitely, yeah. It's definitely huge actually. In terms of like the Indigenous style, like super cool. Like there is not just cool, but it's also just like super relevant. Like it's an amazing like the pride a lot of these guys have in performances. Yeah, absolutely amazing. But in terms of the music scene in Australia, in terms of the rock scene, the alternative music scene, there's a very awesome supportive scene in Australia. It's something that I was not really privy to until going there, is that since it is like their own giant island, essentially a giant continent of an island, they're very, everything's very like domestic. Everything's very in. They don't get like any influences. There's some American influence, some British influence, but they definitely like to really bring their own artists up. And they have the Triple J, like from the ABC, which is like kind of their equivalent of like the CBC, like a national broadcaster essentially.
Okay.
They have a radio station. It's called Triple J. Any Australian would know exactly what this is, but it's essentially a radio that plays alternative music, but it's access all through. So you can tune into this radio station anywhere, but they don't play any one genre. Like it's all and it's hugely Australian music, though it's the main influence. But it's any genre from good alternative rock music, or like a little bit on the pop side, a little more on the electric side, metal music, hip hop music. They'll drop Kendrick Lamar, and then they'll drop into one of some indie rock band, into Bring Me the Horizon, into that, and this is all just simultaneously popping. And if they won't edit it too, if there'll be full songs in however but if there's swears, they'll just be like, language warning, right before the song plays, and then they'll drop the song in its entirety. It's like, it's up to you as a parent, if you're listening and you're maybe in the car on the radio and you have kids on, be like, okay, well, I should maybe just turn off the radio. I'm not just going to censor the song and then, play it, and it just, does the song injustice sometimes when they do that. So it's played in their entirety. Amazing support that they give to these artists, because then they have this whole system where they bring them up. It's called Unearthed. So
Okay.
you can you could even put your music, or I could put my music on Unearthed, and they'll showcase it, or they'll have like a sub radio station where they bring up these artists. So it's a really kind of internal domestic program of building up musicians. But yeah, some amazing musicians like that have come out of Australia because of this program, and huge influences now, like Gang of Youths. They're a huge Australian band that I love. And Camp Cope, another band, I'm like, oh my God, their music is so cool. So yeah, huge influence in terms of how they do their music scene. I think that is so cool, and I think other countries got to take a page from that, of supporting the music scene, because we just don't see that enough. And Australia is so good at really just bringing up artists, which is so cool.
Yeah, it is awesome. It's funny enough, a lot of my favorite bands or artists are from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite hip hop is all from Australia.
Yeah, right.
And then you have Paper Kites, and you have
Hilltop
Carnival.
Hoods,
Yeah, there's so many talented artists out of
Yeah,
Australia.
and it's huge. So many of them come from the Unearthed Triple J program, and that just shows that it's you're getting the support, getting that. So it's cool. Once you get true backing, you can really do some pretty awesome things.
Yeah, I think it's because they also really pride themselves on their culture.
Exactly, right? Because it's hard to get other people. It's different for us when we share huge border with the States, so it just flows in from America. So we definitely just get American influence in Canadian culture, and it's just so hard to cut that off at a point. There's a point where we have some culture, but the TV shows we watch, so much of the music we listen to, so much of the stuff is all so much American based, where there it's just not as inflowing as much, right? You gotta import it in more versus us. So yeah,
Canada's just so young too. It doesn't have its culture because it
so
it
is
was
Australia.
multicultural.
Yeah,
That's how we broadcasted ourselves for forever. It was multiculturalism was our culture, but that's not a culture. You taking everyone else's culture and making your own out of it it's not really. It's just a big blend. So Canada's still trying to find what it is and who it is. It's kind of in its teenage phase. That's how I always like to say it. You know what I mean? It's figuring out what it wants to do as it grows, and that's kind of where we're is at pivot points constantly. And then eventually it'll settle because it is so young. There's buildings in Europe that are 10 times the age we are as a country. You know, so.
Yeah, it helps when you have stuff building off of the previous generation, for sure. But Australia is also very young as well too, so I think it can be done. I think it just shows when you kind of have a more of a national kind of effort, because cool thing with Triple J is that they have this hottest 100. So you vote for your 10 favorite songs, and then they'll tally all of that up, and they'll have this big Triple J Day where it's this hottest 100 going from all the way down from from the 99
cool.
to a 1, and it's the biggest music democracy system in the world that anybody votes on. So it's so cool. So to just have that kind of engagement is, I think, massive. So I think countries can push more to just pushing the arts more of the front, and you'll get results. And I think, I don't know if North America does that enough. So
CBC does. It has.
They do.
I can't remember which one it is. one of the shows, but one of the shows when I used to do construction, we used to listen to it all the time. And my favorite thing was they would bring on Aboriginal artists, from DJs to singers and hip hop artists, and there's a lot of really cool art that's not really broadcasted. That's Canadian.
Yeah, CBC is amazing. They're so great, and so I'm kind of little fearful for a new government if we do get a conservative government. You know, if that would still get funded and still have those problems. So you know, it's something to keep like an eye on, because I know like Polyev has said some pretty bad things about the CBC, and you're like, well, I don't know, like maybe there's some show, like maybe some of the news programs, or maybe they just skew liberal or that, but like to axe the whole thing, like I said, what they do for musicians and artists and art and culture, it would be like disgusting. It would be horrible to Canadians. So that does concern me, and I hope there would be enough of us Canadians to be like, don't like ever touch any of these arts funding, if not put more into it. So yeah, I guess
I think that's one thing that does lack in Canada is funding for the arts.
For sure it does.
We have so many amazing artists that struggle to even get seen because our country is so big with such a tiny population. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like California has more people than our entire country. So it's kind of it's so far spread that it makes it very difficult for especially musicians to get heard, B, get seen, and then C, travel across the country. Right. That's the hardest, just because you want to be playing.
Massive country too, as you're traveling huge distances between to like go to this tour to make it. It's tough. We definitely are faced against it.
There's a lot of wicked programs.
I still think we're doing good though. Like I said, the music scene is at its highest point in terms of the local scene. You know, we're supportive, so I have hopes for it right now, and I don't want to ever get pessimistic on the scene. But you know, it obviously could be better. It could be better at everything we do in life. But you know, it is. I'm happy to see where our local scene is. I'd like to see the global or the Canadian scene kind of all match up that. But you know, we can only do what we can do.
Yeah, our local scene is very unique, and I think it's because if you were to look at the Okanagan as its own little island offset, it's not on the main highway for Canada, which is probably why a lot of artists don't really come through here, because it's not along the main highway. But
I think that's changing, like in terms of just the population, in terms of everything, and like it is becoming more of a center. So I can see,
especially the south of or like the Okanagan Event Center.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And just allowing more venues. That's always been an issue too. So I really hoping to see some more come to light. That medium-sized venue. That's what it's such a huge lack, I think, in the scene. We have so many great bars that will will host music and do that, but they only have a capacity of only that few hundred, a few hundred at most, and that's tough. And then you got that venue, and then you got the event center and the stadiums and the hockey arena. So it's like we need that middle one, so musicians that are in that middle phase in their career can come here more easily, and not just make it more viable so they can sell tickets, have a venue that's appropriately sized, but not too big, right? And I feel like we're definitely lacking that within the Okanagan, that kind of middle bar. So that's what I'm really hoping up can kind of fill that void, so we can get that medium artist, so musicians can open up for them. And
I think it'd be cool to see the Cleveland open up for local shows.
Cleveland's tough though because it's a seated venue.
I know.
Yeah, so I would ideally like to see something that has a good floor and some sort of almost like a
bare bones.
Yeah, kind of like that. I would almost like a Commodore would be that would be perfect. It still has a bar, still has enough, but big. That's why I think. Sorry. That's why the Mule, the old the Blue Mule nightclub in Penticton that turned into Slackwater for a good amount of time, Slackwater Brewing, and then so when they took the venue over, they kind of have their big. That venue was set up to be a nightclub. There was a dance floor in the middle, and then an upper deck where you could all kind of watch down in that. So there were some great DJ shows that kind of came to that venue, that medium-sized venue with about 500 capacity. So when the brewer took it over, they put big tanks right in the middle, which was cool. They had to brew somewhere, and it was more of a brewery, a small little bar tasting kind of area. But that, they have left now that venue. So I'm just come on, please get someone in there, turn it back into a music venue.
was
Turn
Chris.
because it's set up. The tanks
Yeah.
take them back out again, turn that back into it's there. It's like a very potential venue. So I'm like, it's open right now. I don't know what's happening to that venue. So I'm like, oh please, the music gods, turn that into that good medium-sized venue, because that's what the Okanagan needs big time.
It does. I think also embracing all ages venues would be a nice thing.
Yeah,
So
for
that's where like
sure.
Cleveland opening up for that, or there's an amazing theater in Lake Country out in Kelowna that has a wicked setup, and it's like attached to the school. So like if you could incorporate doing the shows and bringing in new clients, and by clients I mean like a younger crowd, and inspiring them to, a lot of them probably like music, they just don't know how to get into performing.
Yeah.
We had the opportunity of getting to meet the elders of the scene who taught us the ropes, and we ran with it, and I think they don't have that.
Yeah, no, that's very true. That's very true. Because so many of the bars, so many of that
Like even if you are good enough to play in a bar, you're not allowed to stay in the bar.
100%, exactly.
Right? Like,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You have to sit outside until you
exactly.
perform, then you got to leave. And
it's so wild.
it is really, I think it's a really weird thing, because like wanting to inspire or have a thriving art scene isn't based on the current artists that you have. A thriving art scene is a continuous breed of artists that are going to flourish, not a select few. So it's really hard when you have like no really options within the Okanagan for like people who aren't established to get established, because like you have to work so hard to get to a winery if you're a singer and songwriter. You can't just apply, right? You have to have a reputation, or they're not even going to look at you.
Oh yeah.
How do you build that reputation if you're just starting out?
That's it.
Right?
That's always that trick. So, yeah, I think it's just giving those opportunities, right? Like I think they just have to be willing to just go on a limb a little bit too on some of these people, because you might just be totally surprised. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that one. That's tough.
Yeah, it is. I think that the one thing that the Okanagan always has had, though, is a very unique sound. You can always tell when somebody's from the Okanagan, because their sound I find is very, not so much the metal scene. You can tell the Kelowna's metal scene because it's Kelowna's metal scene sounds like that. But like DFY, Lake Man, Run Rabbit Run.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there was the indie and rock bands were so, I don't want to say psychedelic, but there was a very like unique thing that was coming out of the Okanagan.
And I still think that kind of still persists today. Like there's some really unique sounds in the bands that we're playing with. Like even now, like like the was it the Crazy? Oh no, not the Crazy Eights. We just played with them last week. But Folk Bastard. Yeah, like they got like this really unique sound going on, and there's a band Bucket out of Kelowna that we played with. They had like this like kind of surfer punk rock kind of sound. Yeah, so I think I totally agree with you. It's not like generic, so to say. Like, it has its own little flair to it that it's something I think unique to BC a little bit, because you hear a lot of the, great music for sure, but it sounds like sometimes when you play these songs, you're like, oh yeah, I've heard this song before. Like I totally, and you're like, oh yeah, no, I haven't, because it just sounds kind of like another song that I've heard before. But I don't know, it's a little bit different here in the Penticton scene. We got a unique little flavor for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of amazing music that's come out of Penticton, and a lot of amazing artists. Like Shane Koizen is globally known for what he does, and it's weird to think that like growing up at the Hog's Breath, watching him perform before he was ever big was like, it's what we used to do on a Friday night or a Thursday night when it was open mic. It's just, Penticton has always been, especially when we were younger, very supportive. Like one of my favorite memories still to this day is Rocktoberfest.
Yes.
When the Union played. And like
that's
that was like one of the days where I was like, I want to do this. Like watching the Union play and Hardball play.
Was that at Smith and Co?
No, that was at the tennis bubble.
Oh yeah,
Long time ago.
Bubble.
Yeah, and it was like
before it popped.
Yeah, and like that's the thing is, there's like Penticton used to have so much opportunity for like musicians with venues, and it was almost like you had to compete. You were competing on Saturday nights for like, oh, well, do I want to go to this show or that show?
Yeah, I know, right?
And when you only have two venues now, the Hub and Clancy's, realistically, like Dream Cafe hosts the very like in-depth personal shows because it is a very small venue. You can't really like have a rock band throwing down.
There's kind of actually, I think they have different owners in the last few years where they are trying to explore a little bit of that scene a bit more. Like like Daniel Wesley's playing like next week, and I wouldn't say he's like super, like he's definitely chilled back a bit, but I think they are branching a bit. But yeah, they're still with, it's not too far off of that like very jazz folky kind of like stripped back kind of sound that they've had for years and years. I think I think they've realized that there is a change in the music scene, and you have to change with that, and not just have like pure adult contemporary music all the time, right? Like you got to kind of have like a bit of vibe. So I think they're starting to realize that, but it's a tough venue. That one because it isn't that very big too, like we just kind of mentioned.
Parking, yeah,
and all parking. They're all kind of roughly in that same kind of venue size, but the Hub is great. I'm so happy what they're doing. I'm so glad they're a great music venue in the scene that's got a stage and great vibes there.
Matt's always been very supportive of the scene from Ska Sound Days. We've all bought in something on Midnight Madness from him, you know what I mean? So it's kind of cool to see him with a venue now too. But I think that there's a lot of places that there's a ton of opportunity in Penticton. It's just, I think, the city itself, not city council or like that, but Penticton itself deciding whether arts is more important or beer and wine is more important. And that's, I think, the one big thing that really made me leave Penticton and move back to Kelowna was everything is breweries or wineries, and it's really hard to like do any art when there's no venue.
Right.
Right. So like, it's amazing to see what the venues that do art.
I know that there is a society in Penticton that's, I can't remember their name, but are trying to push for, like, they've in the past kind of had fundraisers and that kind of things to try and get a music venue. I think before it got torn down, I think it was the Nanaimo Hall. They were trying to like get that and turn that into a music space or something. Like, so I think there is some push for it. Clearly not enough because it hasn't come to fruition. But
yeah, it's hard.
Like, it just takes someone with just a good checkbook, and if they just want, right? And it can happen, right? Like, there's some great like philanthropists in Penticton that have done super great things. And just giving their money up, like the Peter Brothers does with like the hockey arena, and they just like pay for kids to go. Like, that's huge. Like, it just does take somebody like to be like, yeah, I'm just gonna pay for this, right? And it's to rely on that, it sucks, but it can easily just happen like that if somebody just wants to just do it. But otherwise it's the taxpayers, and then it's a whole can of worms of trying to get funding and blah blah blah. It has to be profitable and stuff. But it's so nice that somebody can just be like, yeah, let's just build this. Boom. I gotta win the lottery.
In a great world, right? Yeah, that's exactly what I would do. I know, because I've looked into it, and there's a lot of legal aspects, and I think zoning is a huge thing. Building soundproof building, it's
huge. Yeah,
it's tough. Almost intimidating when you want to start doing it. That it kind of just pushes you away. Like, actually having a bar with overhead for food makes more sense. Than actually, but that's the thing, right? Like, most venues will close because they're bars. They close because they don't have enough people coming in to buy the food or the liquor, but they don't want to have entertainment to provide people to come in to buy the food and the liquor. Right, so they end up shutting down within 2-3 years and going bankrupt because there's this huge separation between what business owners think the entertainment is versus what entertainment is being provided. Like, artists know what we do. We know our realm. We don't tell you how to run your kitchen. Right? Like, bars who don't know how to run shows just let the bands do it because they know what they're doing. They've been doing this. That's their skill set, right? And you'll see that, like, Clancy's took that risk. And Clancy saw the benefit, and they still see it. And I think that a lot of other bars will either have to gravitate towards doing that because our music scene is kind of what brings people in the off season, especially in the winter. Like, what else are you going to do in the Okanagan, right?
No, for
so
sure.
if bars and venues want to like continue to run through, then I think teaming up with your local artists is like the smartest thing you could do.
Yeah.
And I think it will happen. You kind of see it
It
happening
is,
more
yeah.
and
That's
more.
what we've kind of been touching on this whole time. Is that, yeah, I do think we are reaching that point. There's a supportive scene. There's a definitely a drive for music. You know, and especially as we're the ones kind of becoming city councilors, we're the ones getting in charge. You know, we're at the age now where a lot of us are running and that kind of thing. So if it's our values that we would truly think I do think it is starting to happen a lot more because of that. So yeah, I'm hopeful for sure.
That might be in the cards one day.
All right.
All right, run city council. That'd be
yeah,
fun.
absolutely. I definitely think that's always a good way to get
Yeah.
your things, get your ideas heard, to get your thoughts out there, and see if
Yeah.
it is receptive and everybody else wants that too. Then that's sometimes the roads you got to go down.
Yeah, it's actually a very valuable
Right.
thing to say. If you had one piece of advice that you would give musicians, upcoming musicians, what would it be?
Never give up on it. Just always just keep it in the back burner. Don't ever just be like, oh, I used to drum, I used to play guitar. It's something. Just always keep up with it. Like, you don't realize how much of a void in your life that you have until you don't have music there. And it might not, maybe if you're not a performer and maybe you just, you don't feel like you could do it, but just going to shows, listening to music, subject yourself to new music, not getting stuck into those old, your favorite songs from, the songs you grew up with in those 2000s, and be like, like there's so much great music out there. The streaming platforms are so set up to throw in new music at you. Like, if you just can get into an algorithm where you're on Spotify into somebody's playlist that they made, you can open yourself up to a world of great new music. And yeah, just perform if you are a performer, and yeah, don't ever give up on the music, because it's it's a cherished thing. Absolutely.
It is. Well, I want to thank you for doing this.
No,
I
thanks, Rob.
appreciate you.
Appreciate it, man.
I know that we'll always talk and always be
Absolutely.
creatively linked.
That's it. We've had
as
a
the
long history
twins.
together,
Yeah,
and
since birth. So
that's it. Yeah, we were born on the exact same day, on the exact same hospital, about, I don't know, a few hours apart, I think it was. Yeah, it was. So we definitely have a cosmic link there.
Yeah.
And that's not going anywhere anytime soon. So I appreciate you doing this, Rob. It's great. You're an awesome man for the
you.
music scene, and what you're doing here is so valuable. So thanks
Thank you.
again, buddy.
Awesome. We'll see you guys next time.